Hello, welcome to another training session for a Houdini training. My name is Gianvito Serra, and today we're going to talk a little bit about digital assets, good best practices, and creation strategies. Since we last class, we talked a bit about, we learned a bit about how to create digital assets. We're going to delve just a little bit into some things that are good for, when creating a digital asset. Okay? We'll start by creating or by bringing a column in here. If you guys remember, our column was a geometry type operator or a surface operator, a SOP operator. In order to actually get to it, we will want to press tab and actually drop a geometry node first. Okay. The reason why, again, because you guys remember we talked a bit about how Houdini works in different contexts. So, you right now are in the object context, which is where you have all your objects, your cameras, your lights, etc., and in objects. And what we want to do is to actually go inside of one of our objects to drop a column generator. So see, we are now inside of a geometry context. And in here, we're going to press tab and drop our column generator. Okay? Very cool, so we'll go ahead and set the focus to this. Cool. So, if we go inside of a column generator, you will notice that we have our network, and it's not a terribly large network, but it is, it is obviously a lot of nodes that we have to deal with. Because of that, it is important to ensure that we set up our digital assets in such a way that anybody can really come in and be able to look at your digital assets and know a little bit about what's going on. Okay, so we're going to learn a few ways that we can go about doing so. Probably the first best practice is to use naming conventions. Okay, so it's good. It will be very good to know. Okay, so here is a circle. What does the circle lead into? There is a tube. What does the tube actually do? Okay. So what we're going to do is actually name this into something that makes a lot of sense. So in this case, for example, I'm gonna call it tube underscore a column body. There we go. Okay. So that gives me at least a little idea that this tube over here is going to actually be the body of my column. Okay. So if we keep driving down, and I'm gonna go ahead and step through this. Okay. Here is carve, which actually takes a little slice of the actual body. So we can actually mention here that this is the slice of body. Okay. And keep going down here, and we'll get to the project, and now we can say, and you will notice here that we're actually projecting this curve. Okay, so we can say project column groove curve. I personally like having the operator name at the front and then put it after that what it actually does, but every convention is gonna vary depending on what works best for you. But the important thing is to make sure that we do use naming conventions, because this actually makes it so that other people can look at your network and it makes it easier for them. So now in this video, I'm going to go ahead and actually pause the video for a second so that I can go and name all the nodes and you don't have to watch me naming all the nodes. Okay, so I went ahead and actually named all the nodes so that you can see a bit of what is looking like here. I'll make this bigger so you can see a bit better. You will notice that if you look at this, it's a little bit easier now to read what's going on, right? We have a circle, which is a groove curve, the line, which is the groove side, and I transform it to get the groove height, and then I merge them, and obviously you can actually step through these nodes and see all the operations happen, as you're actually doing them. So it becomes actually very easy to just be able to visualize this thing in addition to actually having the text that tells you what's going on. Okay. So yeah, going down, you will see even over here, I went ahead and actually named top caps, and then the bottom caps with names that actually make sense, for each one of those. Even though the networks look very similar, the names, are modified a little bit. If anything, I'm gonna probably, because this one has an edit, but this one doesn't, I'm gonna call this an edit top cap curve point. So if one day I wanna add bottom cap curve points, I can just move this over here and name it that way. And cool, I even took care of naming all the merges with explaining what is merging, and even name the null node which is what we pass when there is no caps chosen, no caps, so that people understand why we have a null there. It is important to name the null nodes even if they don't do anything, just to kind of make an understanding of why you even wanted to use one. Okay, so moving all the way to the bottom, you will notice I also have an out node, which is my final one, and that one I just put all caps out. Okay. A very typical thing to do is to actually have null nodes which actually represent, the outputs of your mesh. And in Houdini, one thing that you can do is that you can have multiple outputs in a single digital asset that does different things. So a good practice is to always name them all capital out. So for example, if I actually had a separate output here, which was maybe the column without color, so out column no color for some reason, we can also do this as well. Okay, and maybe and therefore, at this point it makes it easier if you are looking for these nodes to actually filter out any node filter in by any node which has the words out on it. Okay, very cool. Another strategy that I'm going to show, another good practice, if you're going from 13 to 14, there was the introduction of what is called output nodes. Okay, the output nodes are brand new, and it's literally typing output that you get one. And what they allow you to do, you will notice that they have a slightly different aura here versus this one, but we can also go ahead and set this one as the active node, and now it gets the blue flag and the aura around it, like we did here. I'm going to call this one out, and I'm going to delete my old one. What this new node does is that it allows you to put your focus anywhere you want, okay, in your network, but Houdini will know that no matter where the blue flag is, the output node is the one that will be outputted out of this surface operator. So if I actually go back out, you will notice that no matter what I do, this will always output the final column. Whereas if I dive inside, even though this is what I'm outputting, I can see other things that are within the network. This is useful because often when you're working on digital assets, you may forget that you left the blue flag in a node that is not the output node. Okay, having an explicit output is a safeguard to ensure that that doesn't happen, that you always have something that is explicitly an output. You can also have multiple output nodes, which if we look at the parameters for this, you will notice that it is asking for an output index, and this will allow you to have multiple output plugs on your node. But we'll talk a bit about multiple plugs nodes in a further future session. Okay. Very cool. So we talked a little bit about naming conventions. We talked a little bit about using the output node. The next thing we're going to talk about is color conventions. Okay, so as much as naming your nodes is very useful, it is also very useful to color code them so that people know what makes the most sense. Okay, so one way that you can do this, for example, is to select the first nodes of your network, the ones that actually create the assets, or the ones that actually pass the input data in, and actually come over here and color them in, say, yellow, for example. Okay, this just tells people that, hey, this is where the data begins, and down is where the data ends. Okay, you can obviously tell by going from top to bottom, but this helps tell what it helps tell what a little bit better, like what is actually the intended creation operators of this network. Okay, we could even go as far as to even color the curves, since they're actually also inputs that create data, for the actual network. Okay, Likewise, I recommend always coloring the output node in blue. This is just so that people know that no matter where the flag is, no matter where anything is, even if you have an old node, people will always know that the blue node is the one that you intended to be the output, okay? If you had multiple outputs, again, say for example I had another output, and I'll make this one, there we go, we'll make this one output number 1, output index 1, and this one is going to be the one without colors, okay? I want it, you can also come in here and color these a different color. So for example, green, just to symbolize that this is an output, but it's not the main intended output, okay? Okay. So what else can we color here? Well, we could, for example, you know, look for operators which take data from the top, and even color those in a different color, like for example, like green or something, okay? And there is different ways how we can go about coloring these nodes and actually for naming conventions, but this is just some examples that we can use to, you know, to actually color code our network, okay? Very cool. All right, so we talked a little bit about colors. We talked a little bit about names. Another good strategy to use is to actually use subnets as well. Okay, so subnets allow you to grab a piece of a network and put it into a small little subnet to make it easier for anybody who comes here to read what's going on. Okay. So say, for example, in this particular case, these little blocks of nodes here have a very specific function. One does the top cap, one does the bottom cap, okay? So what we can do is to actually select these guys and go ahead and click on this button. And this will actually create a subnet of that. And we can call this the bottom cap, okay? Likewise, we can go in here and select these two, and again also collapse them, and this becomes the top cap. Okay, so the nice thing about this is that it makes part of a network very clear, much more clear to read. Okay, if we go inside of one of these subnets by simply double clicking, you will notice that inside we now have a mini network, which is what was outside before, okay? And in here, just like we do on the outside, we can go ahead and actually put an output node. So then that way we know what the output of this network is. And we're gonna go ahead and call it out. Now the thing to remember about this is that this output node, or this output, is only outputting out to this subnet, okay? It is not going to try to output to, you know, the whole digital asset. If we go back out all the way to the top, our digital asset is still the full column that it used to be, okay? So keep in mind, I mean, it's almost like a mini digital asset, if you will, and you can actually convert this subnet into a digital asset if you want to, you know, which we'll show we'll show a little bit later. But for now, let's go ahead and continue this. So we put an output node. We can also, another good practice is also to put in any kind of network input an actual null node at the very beginning of a network input and call it all capital in, okay? And then we color that one in yellow. So then that way we can, this just allows us to put the display flag on this and see exactly what is coming in out of this before we actually modify it with a separate node, okay? Very cool. So I'm going to do the same thing on this one, just to reiterate. I'm going to go inside of the top cap, and I'm going to press tab. And remember, you can click on the wire so that you have it selected. Just tap it with the left mouse and it's selected. And then press tab and drop a null node and call it in. Okay. And then over here, we're going to put another one. Put an output node, and this is gonna be my out. There we go. Very cool. This is coming along very nicely. Now, we can continue obviously to clean this even further. So for example, in addition to doing here, we bring the curve and the actual line on the side. We can even go ahead and actually take all the parts where we're actually doing all the joining and mirroring, and simply put them that in a subnet. Okay, and this will become our create groove curve. Okay, and this basically just outputs a little curve that is our groove. And if we go inside now, we have these nodes in here, and I'll go ahead and actually put an output node. And out. And then we'll actually put another node here, a null, and then we're going to call this one in. Very cool. If you're wondering too what these little boxes are, they simply represent your inputs from the subnet. So if you look at the subnet, it has 4 little plugs. These 4 little plugs represent these 4 little squares, and this is just taking the one from the very left. Okay, very cool. And then on the bottom here, we can now take, for example, the section where we actually do projections on a slide, where basically we project this curve into the slice of a body and put it all into a single subnet. I like to actually do it in such a way that, you know, the subnets do actually encapsulate a particular functionality. So for example, if we come here and select all of these guys, what we should get out of this is basically the merged groove and slice as a nice little piece. Okay, so if we go ahead and we come here, let's go ahead and grab all of these nodes, and then we're going to put them into a subnet. Okay, now this one is going to basically be carve groove into slice. So look how much clearer this is now, right? We have a slice here. We have a slice here, and we have a curve here, and then we're saying that we're carving the groove into the slice, and this is basically what we get. So it's much easier for anybody to read what's going on here. Okay, and then here is our copy, which generates this, and we don't have to put this in a subnet, and then diffuse. Okay, some of these things we can probably leave out, and I think that will be sufficient. So, oh, looks like our out node got moved a little bit. Here we go. So now we can see this here. Very cool. All right, so let's review our network now. It's looking very clean right now with all of the nodes. Okay. Much easier to read, much easier to follow. Okay. So that, I think, covers some pretty good practices, at least on how to actually work inside of your digital asset. Okay. Very cool. Now, one other thing that I will mention before we end, and I'm going to go ahead and also save my digital asset so that I have it. Okay. Remember to save a digital asset after you do all those network changes. Right click on it and go to Save Operator Type right above the button. Okay, that saves all your changes without having to have the type properties windows open. And then I click on it and say Match Current Definition, and we should be now good. Okay, so now we have a very nicely organized digital asset for anybody who's coming here and actually looking at your asset. Okay, very cool. Okay, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next session.